All right, what's going on, everybody? This is SJG. Welcome to the D2 HBCU football show presented by HBCU Game Day. And look, man, we have finally come to that point in the road. There are only two HBCUs left playing. I'm sorry, let me take that back because it's a whole new year. It's a little bit different than normal. So there are actually four HBCUs in the Division II level that still have football to play. We'll get to the second part of that first. But first, let's have let's Chris, let's talk a little bit, man. You got a chance to watch the CIAA championship game. We'll have a little clip from that, and then we'll talk about your thoughts about that, and then go over to the SIAC. I had a chance to actually be there, and so we got a chance to see the celebrations. And here's just some of the inside stuff that you don't necessarily get to see when you are at when you're watching this stuff on TV. So first, we got our guy Jada Byers. There you go.
This is what we do.
Number 3, Jada Byers. He says he wants the fans to make some noise.
I need my shirt. I need my shirt. I need my shirt.
And the HBCU All-Star Classic for NCAA All-Star Weekend.
This is what we do.
Number 3, Jada Byers. He says he wants the fans to make some noise.
Do that. Great job with the announcing. And that was one Jada Byers, who already holds the CIAA and single season school rushing record at Virginia Union from last season. Had some injuries this year and still managed to run for 1,000 yards. Had a big game in the championship game. And yes, the young man is definitely entitled to a shirt. He's also got a ring coming, as well as some postseason play. So great celebration by him. And then I had one of his teammates there. So when you win a championship, right, I'm learning that this is the thing. I never won a championship except for on Madden. Make sure you guys are liking the stream, and also leave us a comment. Let us know who you're supporting in your HBCU this week. I never won a championship, only on Madden, and my mom would usually be in the other room, but she didn't care. But it's a little bit different, I understand, when you actually do it on the field. So here's what we got.
I told you, man. I told you he was going to be one of the ones, man. Didn't I tell you he was going to be one of the ones, man? I told you I was going to do something. Hey, nah, but still, I won. Man, I told you, man. I told you I was going to win.
And we're going to cut it short because another one of his friends was making another call, and it wasn't quite as polite. But hey, it is what it is. Championship is what you play for all year. So shout out to Virginia Union. Shout out to Benedict College. We'll have Kendric on a little bit later to talk about the SIAC championship game. But Chris, talk to me about this game. You follow the CIAA all year long, as you have, for so many years now. Fayetteville State, Virginia Union. I have my thoughts on the game, but I'll take yours first. What were your thoughts on the game as we had Virginia Union coming out with a 21-10 win? Chris, you there? All right, we'll give Chris just a second. We will give Chris just a second. I think we may have lost him for a second. Chris, are you there?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Sorry about that, guys. When you look at this game, it was certainly a pretty hard-fought game simply because it's a low-scoring affair that typically would benefit Fayetteville State. But Virginia Union, the one thing that they can do is disrupt the timing of offenses, and that's kind of what you kind of got in this game, especially from that defensive line. Fayetteville State really just got behind early, and those 10 points was what, a kickoff return? With 7 of those points, and that just tells you how much they struggle on offense, and we've seen Fayetteville sort of respond to that game after game throughout the season, but it just seemed like in this rematch that they just didn't have it. It just wasn't there. Cinderella came They just ran out of juice, whatever it was. It just didn't happen. And now, right now, it looks like a 1 year anomaly in this run for them of making it to the championship game last year. So, Virginia Union, they had their own struggles, but as the game wore on, it seemed like things started to turn into their favor. They're just kind of salted the game away, pinned their ears back. So, certainly kudos to them because this has been a long time coming for the Panthers. We thought this was going to happen last year, where we would see this matchup. That didn't happen. It's just been a long time coming, and definitely congratulations to them.
Yeah, no doubt about that, Kris. You talk about that, and we'll get back to Virginia Union in just a second. Everybody, I appreciate everybody for hopping on. Make sure you like the stream and share it as well. We are on Facebook, making our debut there, so make sure you guys get that out in the Facebook land. But yeah, you talk about it. We talked about Fayetteville State all year. They kind of skirted by their competition once they got into the CIAA. I think we really saw the same Fayetteville State in the championship game of the CIAA that we saw in the first game against UNC Pembroke. If you remember, then they got on the board. They got into they had drives where they were right there and just couldn't get it done. They couldn't get it in, and they ended up losing that game. They had got a big touchdown by Barry Elliott. Their defense ended up, giving them a lift in that game, but they couldn't get it done. And I think that was the same story that was in their second game. I believe that was Lenore Ryan as well. The offensive deficiencies of Fayetteville State, we've seen it at times in the past. They've had a lot of offensive coordinators and things like that. But I think, this year they found a way to win once they got into CIAA play every week. I want to play a quick clip from head coach Richard Hayes talking about the coming up on the short end again. Obviously for him, this is the fifth time for Fayetteville State having gone and lost, the sixth time overall. So here's a little bit of what he had to say. I was at the catch.
From the second quarter, at momentum. From the second quarter, at the end of the second quarter, we got a field goal. We should have got a touchdown, but we got a field goal. We got the ball back at the beginning of the third, and I thought we had momentum on our side, but it just didn't happen for us like that. Hats off to Virginia Union. They got a great defense. We got a pretty good defense. We've been struggling kind of on offense all year long, and kind of reared its ugly head today. So there it is.
Coach, you've been 6 times in a row. What does that say about the seniors on the team? Bringing to the Bronco Nation, for showing up and really giving the team the support?
Coming here 6 times in a row is hard to do. I don't care what nobody says. It's hard to come and make a championship game six years in a row. And yeah, we've lost 5 of them, but it's 10 other teams that ain't never been here since I've been in Fayetteville. So I don't care what nobody say about that. You can type it, write it, it don't matter. We're going to continue to do what we do. We're going to continue to make being here every year our goal, and that's what it's going to be. Our fans showed up. I'm really appreciative of that. They showed up. They supported us all year long, and here we are.
All right, that was Coach Richard Hayes coming off of his 6th consecutive CIAA championship game. They won last year. Wasn't able to happen for him this year. We see it over in our comments, break it down to Bulldogs. Y'all are hooping tonight. Congratulations. Y'all might actually come into the tournament with 10 wins this year. Right now, you know who owns Baltimore. I'm gonna say that. Anyway, shout out to break it down to Bulldogs, man. He's had some really great coverage of Bowie State football and basketball. I'm sure he'll continue that as well. CJ has something to say. Says not getting a touchdown in the third. In the red zone and fumbling the punt ended the game. That is, that's really what I think happened to me. Just seeing the game, Union just did what they did. They were running the ball. Jada Byers, Christian Allen also ran the ball as well effectively. Fayetteville State has a good defense, but Virginia Union has an offense that's put up a lot of points against a lot of teams. So they get down 14-0, and it's so crazy. I was actually speaking of Bowie State, I was actually able I was actually able to shoot some of this game with Amir Hall, the top quarterback from the CIAA all time. I will say the greatest career of a CIAA quarterback. Although we did have that discussion a couple of weeks ago about a single year. But anyway, me and him, we were talking, and he was like, "Yo, this." First of all, there was a couple of things that he said because I always love talking to him. First thing he said was, "These guys, they're not throwing the ball; they just run the ball." I was like, "Amir, you're not out there. I mean, let's just be honest. You're not out there." So it's definitely it's a little bit different there. But then, when they went up 14-0, Amir and I were talking, and he was like, "Yo, they need a kick return or something." And lo and behold, Amir Hall, once again, I'm going to count that to another touchdown for whatever his career total is against Virginia Union, because he called that thing, and next thing you know, Barry Elliott is taking it and running into the hills, into the beautiful hills of Salem, Virginia. So, at that point, it's 14-7 at the end of the half. Fayetteville State has some momentum, and you're like, okay, they still got a chance, because nobody believed that they could get in a shootout with Virginia Union. They got into a shootout a couple weeks ago against another defense, but that defense is nowhere near as good as Virginia Union. Let's just say that. And even then, it needed a little bit of luck. So, we get to the second half. I was actually going to get some nachos because all the food was taken in the press box. You know how that goes. I was over getting some nachos, and Fayetteville State hits a 64-yard pass. They get right there into Virginia Union territory, and they're literally they could smell the Union end zone, and they couldn't get in. And I only got a field goal, and I was like, man, that was a big opportunity for them. You're talking about potentially tying that game 14-all early in the second half, and you kind of give yourself a little bit of life. And then I thought the other momentum turnover, the momentum moment was when they had that punt return, and they fumbled that punt return, giving Virginia Union really good field position, and Union was able to go in and punch. We're definitely going to talk about the Florida Bowl game, the Florida Beach Bowl. Don't forget that, because we definitely want to talk about that. But I thought that was also a turning point too, because at that point, 21 points, scoring 2 more touchdowns against that defense, I just wasn't sure that Fayetteville State had it, and it was clear that they didn't. So, again, a great season for Fayetteville State, taking the most of a really inept offense, and making it and getting it back to the championship game in a year where, Kris, I would say it seems like the South got a lot better.
Yeah, I mean, they had their chances. The South had their chances. Most of those teams actually had their chance against Fayetteville State, Livingstone, Winston State, in particular, even St. Aug. They all had their chances. Like, I mean, if you look at how the games were played, St. Aug, was that 7-0 game?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Winston State was up 24-7. Livingstone was up against Fayetteville. I mean, it's just Fayetteville State was able to respond. Here, you get down to the 2-yard line, your opponent 2, and you can't run against Virginia Union. I mean, that's just virtually impossible. 1 touchdown, rushing touchdown, giving up all season long. and you get to the 2, what do you expect teams to do? Run the ball. They tried it one time and they realized it ain't gonna work. So that's a tough place to be in a scenario like that if you're Fayetteville State. So it's just brutal. It's just brutal. I mean, again, hats off to Fayetteville for what they are able to accomplish. There's definitely some wins left on the table, but nothing to be ashamed of here. Just outside the playoffs again for the second year in a row that they probably were top 10 in Super Region 2. So, it's a big deal.
Yeah, no doubt about it. In the comments, I see Break It Down the Bulldog says VSU. They chose VSU. They didn't choose VSU because they had to give the SIC a chance. Y'all are so cute. Y'all are so cute. Y'all are so cute in the CIAA North, man. Y'all are so cute. Y'all talk about rivalries, and y'all love each other, man. Y'all be all ganged up and rooting together. It's not like that in the South. It's not like that in the South. Nobody's like, yeah, win it for the South, man. We actually live amongst each other. We don't like each other. Anyway.
So you wouldn't root for Livingstone if they got into that game to win the game?
Let's move on. So Virginia Union still has some more football to play. We'll talk about them a little bit later. But let's go over and touch on the SIAC. Obviously, Benedict College came into the game unbeaten, unblemished, and unbowed, and they left the same way. They took on an Albany State program that was predicted to finish second. And, Kendric, when he hops on, he'll tell you he didn't think they would finish second. I didn't think they would finish second. Nobody thought that they would well into the year, but lo and behold, they get to the championship game and, they run into a buzzsaw that is Benedict. We'll talk about Benedict a little bit later too as well, but talk about Albany State. This game wasn't close, and I don't think anybody expected it to be. I think last week we laughed, but I think somebody said an alien abduction. That didn't happen, but it was what it was. Talk about Albany State. Similar situation to Fayetteville State. They had a tough schedule coming out of the gate. They also had they started 0-2 with a brand new coach at Quinn Gray. Just talk about Albany State. Obviously they weren't even in the D2 rankings, but just talk about them and their program and what you feel like you saw out of them in year one.
Well, I mean, when you look at Albany, they had some chances early in the season. That Valdosta game, a team that's now in the playoffs, they lost 20-16. I mean, it was a close game, and so they had chances like that. But then you look at kind of where they ended up. They didn't have exactly the stellar offense, especially when they went up against really good defenses, and it showed. I mean, what did they have, like 40 passing yards on Saturday and 134 rushing yards? They just sort of wilted under that kind of pressure. And that's with a veteran quarterback too. I think that's the thing with Albany. So certainly some things to shore up in the offseason for them, but to have done what they did, I think you got to give them a lot of kudos for the way they scheduled their out of conference games. I mean, if they had played some of the out of conference games that some of the other teams had played, we wouldn't be talking about a 6-5 Albany. I mean, we might be talking more like a 3-loss team or something like that. So, or 2-loss team. So certainly kudos to them for the way they schedule, but they definitely got to address the offense going into next year. And that's a must in order to make this work against what we're seeing in the SIAC right now.
Good point. Really good point. And our guy Randall Barr says Albany didn't have an offense, shouldn't have been in the game, had FSU handle business. Hey, we know how that goes. Didn't happen. But anyway, you talk about maybe next year. Well, you guys still have a game though, so I will give you that. But you talk about Albany State. It's so interesting too because their head coach is Quinn Gray, who is the former Florida A&M great, former NFL quarterback, and he's an offensive guy. But you peel back that onion a little bit for folks who don't know. He got that job. In January, coming off of Coach Gabe Gardenia going to Charleston Southern and FBS program, and he was able to. He kind of had to. He had some signing days, but, he'll have his full recruiting class in this year. And so, we expect I think it's, again, a great point that you mentioned early too, is that they had a schedule that was tough. I mean, they had the schedule of a team that was looking to compete for the playoffs and that's the type of schedule that you have when you've been there with a veteran coach, you got a veteran group coming back. And you're not looking for a cupcake win to say, hey, and feel good about yourself. You're looking to show that you can place amongst the best in your super region, in your division. And so, hats off to Albany State for the job that they did do. And you talk about running up against the buzzsaw, we don't know how much longer that buzzsaw will be in Columbia, but we can have that discussion a little bit later. So in any event, that was Saturday. So we got our two champions. Again, shout out to Benedict, who repeated. Shout out to Virginia Union. As you said, they were a program that every year, it seems like every year since maybe 2015, it's like they're right there to get to the championship game, and then something happens and they don't get it done.
Bridesmaids, yeah.
Yeah, always. Always. Good question. We'll come back to that. But we'll get to the playoffs, then we'll get to the beach ball. Kris, so Saturday is championship Saturday for the CIAA and SIAC. For most of the other conferences, does anybody else have an actual championship game besides the HBCU conferences?
Yeah, so around Division II, you had the PSAC had a championship game. The Lone Star had a de facto championship game with their top two teams playing on Saturday. And I feel like it's somebody else who has a championship game, but it doesn't come to mind. I'm shocked. But yeah, definitely the PSAC had a championship game. Yep.
Right. So let's talk about it. So the CIAA and the SIAC, for those who don't understand, the NCAA Division II has a regional structure for their playoffs to where there's a certain region and certain conferences fit within that region. And after Winston-Salem State made their runs in the Division II title, to the Division II title game in 2012, as well as some other successful ones where they actually won playoff games. Dear God, that seems like so long ago, but we remember. Anyway, they decided to put the CIAA in Super Region 2, which is not only considered the toughest division consistently in D2 football, but it's also the same region where you have the SIAC. So you have both HBCU conferences in one big gumbo, trying to get both of them would like to get ideally multiple bids in the D2 HBC and the D2 playoffs. So they're fighting kind of in the same ground. So with all that going on, we got our NCAA playoff selection Sunday went on. Nobody was surprised. Benedict went number one. They were number one in their super region for the second year in a row, completing again the same feat that WSSU did back in 2011 and 2012. We'll talk about Benedict in a minute because they got to wait for their matchup. But talk to me about Virginia Union, what happened with them, why it happened, and who they're playing, Kris.
First of all, I would just say that I think Super Region 3 would like to have a word with you because that's a really, really tough Super Region when you've got Grand Valley and Ferris playing each other in the first round. That could easily be a semifinal matchup if the things were changed up a little differently. Anyways, and that's really important to kind of like this discussion because when the polls were, when we were looking at the list over the last 2-3 weeks, there's this thing in Division II football that basically they basically seed the top 4 teams and 4 out of 7 who make the playoffs. The lower 3 seeds, they're unseeded. And when they're unseeded like that, then they actually can switch regions as necessary. Now, the other thing about Division II to keep in mind for playoffs is the fact that they like to keep teams relatively close to home in order to cut down on travel expense. So when we started looking at who could possibly make the playoffs at the time, for the longest time, it was Fayetteville State. And then which is much further south geographically than Virginia Union. But when Virginia Union climbed above Fayetteville but to just before Championship Saturday last week, then the map started to change a little bit. So now all of a sudden you have what I would call no man's land. Basically, Virginia and Maryland in the CIAA is a no man's land because they're so close to a lot of teams in Super Region 1, particularly the Pennsylvania schools. If you think about Lincoln, where they are, they're not very far from Westchester. And that's why they end up playing PSAC schools week 1. So everything shook out, and what we ended up having is a Virginia Union actually moving to Super Region 1 and Shepherd in West Virginia moving to Super Region 2. And that was really done to avoid a rematch of Kutztown and Shepherd because they both play in the same division in the PSAC East. There were some other things that was kind of considered. Why not move Ferris State over to Super Region 1 and really moving Ferris to Super Region 1 as an unseeded team? It was just too far. You're looking at a distance of over 600 miles, and that's the threshold that the NCAA uses from flying versus driving. Whereas in this case, if Shepherd wins week 1 and they have to go to Columbia to Benedict, then it's still busable. It's still within 600 miles. So it became kind of a no-brainer in that case. And then you kind of have to see what happens if Shepherd theoretically got past Benedict, theoretically, then you could be looking at a flight after that. But with Virginia Union and Kutztown, if they get past Kutztown, it's still probably another bus ride somewhere else in that matchup. So that's kind of what happened. Why we ended up getting a switch. Why Virginia Union got switched out of Super Region 2 and has returned to the Super Region where the CIAA has actually had more success in the playoffs. So
great information there. Again, he is at D2K Ferg on Twitter as well as Instagram. He's a wealth of NCAA Division II knowledge. He's on the D2 football show every week, as well as he writes a column. So for those of you who, if you aren't familiar with him, I question whether or not you know the CIAA, but in any event, make sure you guys follow him. Chris, he follows that stuff pretty well. So talk to us about the matchup with Kutztown. Who is Kutztown? Because I'm going to be honest with you, I had to look it up. I thought they were in Ohio. It just sounded like an Ohio place. So talk to me about Kutztown, kind of a little bit of their pedigree, who they are, and what are Virginia Union's chances. I know we don't get nobody wants to be on the Summer Jam screen. Well, it's actually kind of fun sometimes. But CJ says they're going to get blown out, and I don't know who CJ's team is. I'm interested. Just not that it's wrong, but I'm just interested. But anyway, talk to us about Kutztown and how they match up with Virginia Union.
So Kutztown is the PSAC, Pennsylvania State Athletic Conference champion. They got to that point by defeating Slippery Rock, which was a top 5 team in the country, who was the presumed number 1 seed until they went and basically got blown out in the championship game. It wasn't close at all. It was very surprising to see what happens, and that's kind of what Kutztown does. They kind of surprise you a little bit, and you're just like, what just happened? If you've ever heard of Andre Reed, the wide receiver, he I think it was like the Buffalo Bills. The stadium there is actually named after him. And so just to give you a favor for who Kutztown is, year after year, they have a coach, Jim Clements. Typically, coaches a really, really tough defense. They are sneaky good on offense. They just find ways to be more and more creative on offense. If you think about what Livingstone did on offense from time to time this season, they're kind of like that. They kind of just sneak out of nowhere and they just drop something in that you just were not expecting. And so they will roll the dice when necessary. So anywho, one of the things about Kutztown to know is run defense. They're kind of like Virginia Union in that they have a pretty good run defense. So I think that could pose some problems for Virginia Union. Also, when forced to pass, I think you got to be a little concerned about how that could shake out as well, because that's not VUU's forte right now. So, but Kutztown sometimes is very hot and cold. They actually lost to Assumption this year, who didn't make the playoffs. They were, close to the top for the Northeast 10, but they didn't make the playoffs. New Haven's actually in Super Region 1. And you just sometimes you just never know what you're going to get with Kutztown, and that makes it a little more difficult to game plan. I would say, but that's a little bit of a rundown with the Bears.
The rundown on Kutztown, man. You missed that opportunity to rhyme, bro. I was messing with you. No, okay, great insight for sure. Last year, Virginia Union hosted a playoff game. They didn't go to the playoffs, but they were able to host a postseason game. I was there against Wingate. It wasn't pretty. The offensive line was overwhelmed on pass protection, and they struggled to pass the ball. Jada Byer still had, I think, maybe 120 yards, but they just weren't able to get anything done. So it'll be interesting this year to see kind of how they adapt to the playoff teams. And they say that that's what they're working towards. Interestingly enough, they didn't play any non-HBCUs, and the only one that was not a CIAA team was Morehouse, who was a doormat in the SIAC. So it'll be interesting to see if that level of competition and playing style if those are things that they have to overcome this year. And then we talk about Benedict. Obviously, they got to bye again, so they'll wait. So talk to me quickly about who they'll be waiting on. Who are the two contenders for the right to play Benedict in South Carolina?
Well, Benedict is the one of 4 teams in the country that gets a bye in the first round. They are the only undefeated team in Super Region 2, and that's how they were able to pull that off for the second year in a row. They're awaiting the winner of Lenore-Ryan, who was the South Atlantic Conference champion, and Shepherd, who had some ups and downs, but was able to make it into the playoffs as an unseeded team out of the PSAC. What makes this game particularly interesting is Lenore-Ryan has a pretty good offense, rather balanced in nature. Between the run and the pass, somebody to look out for them is Dwayne McGee, who's the running back. Had another 1,000-yard rushing, and they absolutely blasted Tusculum in the SAC championship game. That was the one conference I could not remember. The same Tusculum team that Virginia State was able to beat by 4. Lenore-Ryan put up over 40 points and only allowed Tusculum to score 7. So that's kind of how big of a deal that game was. Now, Shepherd has been a team that's sort of rebuilding a little bit after what they were able to accomplish with Tyson Bagent, now the starting quarterback for the Chicago Bears, but has certainly found a groove in the process, and I think they got a little bit of help along the way towards the end of the season. They're also another team that can be rather balanced on offense and typically have a decent defense. Not as good as they've had in prior years, but either way, what you could certainly have in round 2 is a bit of a shootout with the way Benedict has been on offense, and I would say better on offense than they were last year.
Good stuff there. So that's the playoffs. That'll be Virginia Union going to Kutztown on Saturday. Benedict, of course, will wait in the wings. But this year we do have a new addition, and that is the Florida Beach Bowl. It kind of came out of nowhere, if we're honest about it. I remember starting the season, there was talk about, the SIAC and CIAA playing a Week 11 game to try to see whoever that doesn't get into the playoffs, if they can, who's outside looking in, if they can get into the playoffs. And then along comes the Florida Beach Bowl. It's going to be in Fort Lauderdale on December 13th. That's very interesting there. The representative out of the SIAC was chosen as Fort Valley State University. They had a 7-3 season this year, and they had the SIAC championship right in their hands, and it was pried from their cold dead hands. And so that's who's going to represent the SIAC. One of the programs that's usually pretty good. Over in CIAA, it was a little bit interesting because you had obviously Union was probably going to the playoffs. Fayetteville State 8-3, probably outside of the playoffs. You already knew. And then you had Virginia State at 8-2. Didn't get a chance to play in these bowl game because they lost a championship. They lost to Union, and so they were kind of waiting on the outside looking in, waiting to see if they were going to get this Florida Beach Bowl invite. And lo and behold, Monday comes, and out of all the schools in the CIAA, if you would have told me to start the season, Johnson C. Smith University out of Charlotte is going to be in a bowl game in the postseason, you would have made a fool out of me. But here we are. It's happened before. It'll happen again. But here they are at 7-3. So they finished second in the CIAA South, which is their best finish since, I don't know, maybe the Bush era, if that. Maybe. I don't know. It's been a while. One of the two oldest HBCU football programs, but they've had a really good year for them. They went unbeaten in crossover play, and then they took a couple lumps, lost to Shaw, lost to Fayetteville State, but finished strong. They had that, they finally broke the streak against Winston-Salem State that lasted since the Clinton administration, and then they finished with a win over Livingstone. So, what are your thoughts on this? I know there's the football component, there's the travel component, there's the media component. There's so many things, but if you had to guess, and because we're still trying to find answers, why do you think why is Johnson C. Smith in this game over Virginia State?
I don't know, man. Okay, so we think about what the Pioneer Bowl used to be, which is kind of what this is. You would choose whoever was the best from each conference and who wasn't going to the playoffs. So for a while, it was the Tuskegee Invitational, right? They didn't participate in the playoffs, and that's kind of what it was from the SIAC's perspective. And then you get the runner-up from the CIAA championship game in this game. So now you've got a Fayetteville State who could have been an option, wasn't selected. So we go to the next tier, right? We're up here, not available. Whatever reason, I don't know. Somebody knows, shoot me a DM. You go to Virginia State. Seemed to be a lot of interest for Virginia State. They weren't selected, right? And I did see a lot of interaction with Johnson C. Smith wanting to go to this game. I get it. But they're the third option in this deal. So I don't know what it is. I know now we do have a storyline with Fort Valley, but let's talk about Fort Valley's participation before we get to that. You got Albany, right? Who seems to have had interest in going to this game. Wasn't selected. They're runner up. You got Tuskegee, one selected. We got Fort Valley, right? And remember, Fort Valley lost to Tuskegee. That's a tiebreaker to me. So we're down to the third option in the SIAC as well. So basically, this is tertiary type of options here. Nonetheless, what we will have is a game that should feature quite a bit of offense. These two teams can do quite a bit at the quarterback spot, and can run the ball, especially for Johnson C. Smith. And it's going to feature a really good defense for JCSU as well. The main storyline here is just going to be, who was Fort Valley's last coach before Sean Gibbs? Maurice Flowers, who is now at his alma mater, Johnson C. Smith. So, I think it's just one of those things that you're just looking at that storyline, and Fort Valley probably going to be a little bit more pumped for that now. But it's just really interesting to see how this all came out in this whole thing. So I don't know how we got here. That's just what I pieced together. So there's some questions. How did how did we get to why isn't Tuskegee in the playoffs? They play in the Turkey Day Classic. That's the main reason why they forego the playoffs to go to the Turkey Day. Otherwise, they probably would have been ranked at some point in the top 10 for Super Region 2 for the playoffs. But they don't participate and forego that for their rivalry. We don't need 10 points from Fayetteville State. I can't even be mad at that. Like, what are they averaging? 15 points a game? I mean, yeah, that's not gonna sell a lot of tickets, unfortunately. Fort Valley isn't second tier, to be honest. We were behind Benedict for most of the year, and and he got beaten by Albany.
Randall, I feel you, but you were behind them for most of the year, and then I was at the game. Benedict is in a tier of its own. I mean, it's in a tier of its own.
Nobody's in the second tier. It's Benedict and then this third tier. I mean, I don't know.
I feel you though. Hey, all of this could have been avoided if a certain team would have won a certain amount of games. But anyway, if ifs and buts were candy and nuts, we'd all have a Merry Christmas, in the words of Willy Wonka. So yeah, that's the Florida Beach Bowl. It'll be December 13th. As we're in the comments. So that'll be interesting to see how that game plays out. But again, Johnson C. Smith, kudos to them. They won as many games this year. I don't think they've won that many games probably in, I don't know, since post-pandemic. 7-3. We're right there with Fayetteville State. Had their chances just like everybody else in the CIAA South. Came up a little bit short, but 7-3 for them is a big deal. And they're celebrating it. And I did say that, I did point this out there. They're in a little bit of they're in a bigger media market. I don't know how much this matters. Again, I'm still doing the research and trying to report and talk to people, find out what was the process. Like, did somebody turn it down? What's the money and all of that stuff? It's a little bit in the air right now, but they are in a bigger media market. I do live here in the Charlotte region, and I did see Johnson C. Smith being put on TV about being on the Beach Bowl, about being selected. Of course, our own Wally Pitt, who's been doing an excellent documentary on him, who I also blame for them ending that streak against WSSU. By the way, yes, Wally, I blame you and this documentary that you blessed. But yeah, so it's shining more of a light on them. And I said coming into the season, like, they were a sleeping HBCU giant. They got a full allotment of scholarships. So Coach Flowers in this program, kudos off to them. Maybe we'll have them on at some time on this. And then obviously Fort Valley, Coach Gibbs and his guys. Again, disappointing for them. They were coming off an 8-2 season last year. They felt like they should be in the postseason. Had a loss to Benedict, and then the loss to Albany State at the end. That kind of derailed any of those hopes. But hey, they got another game to play. So shout out to them. Shout out to Coach Gibbs as well. Good God, are we talking about the 2010 Pioneer Bowl? I guess. What? Not keep. You know what? Man, you know what? I like you. I like you. Not in prayer. 2006. Oh yeah, this is a good one. 2006 Pioneer Bowl, lost to Tuskegee. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that was the year. I don't know if I know we would have to find out from Kendric if Tuskegee was the champs that year or not, because I know that the champions were actually North Carolina Central, whose running backs coach was Sean Gibbs. So there you go. Let me make sure everybody can see your full name. Not a full bowl selection committee member. So good
Don't
stuff.
blame me. I didn't cause this. I know you have questions. It wasn't me.
Yeah. So we'll see that game in a couple weeks. But beyond that, we also had some superlatives that were given out this year. We also had some superlatives that were given out, the players of the year and everything like that. And Chris, everybody can go see the full list on our website. But what were some of your thoughts on the players of the year on either of the conferences, and maybe somebody that got left out?
So I actually wrote a column on this on the D2 football site that you can check out that talked about not just the championship game, but this as well. I call it the all snub team because there's always some players that kind of get left out on there. And but if we talk about who actually were the players of the year, um, Isaiah Freeman makes sense. You look on the defensive side of the ball, makes sense, right? You look at special teams, question mark. I thought Justice C. Smith's kicker probably should have got that nod. But I get it. I mean, it's I understand, right? Willie Drew for defense. It slipped my mind for a second, but Willie Drew on defense for Virginia State actually he's got an invite to the East West Shrine Bowl and I think the Senior Bowl as well. So that's a pretty big deal. There's another defensive back who's getting a lot of press after what we saw with Joshua Williams for Fayetteville State a couple years ago. So that's pretty awesome to see that. There's quite a few players I thought got left out. I thought Elizabeth City had quite a bit of good things that happened to them on offense at the offensive line level, and they didn't have anybody make it onto the all-conference team. I thought that was a little questionable, especially given what their running back Adams Duxon was able to do in trying to revive their rushing game. Also Keyshawn Hickley, had more receptions than anybody in the CIAA. So, him being left out, I think I understand the logic, but certainly, kind of sucks to not have him sort of recognized there. And like I said, I have a few other folks on the list that certainly worthy of recognition as well beyond the first and second team. But the one thing I would say is the future is certainly bright. There was, you had quite a bit of standouts. Stephen, pretty sure you're excited about Dalen Lee being a first teamer at quarterback after some very, very, very lean years for Winston State at the quarterback position and having a revival of offense, for them. So, yeah, I mean,
but it was a little bit fun.
Yeah. I mean, what can you say? You had some excitement, if nothing else, watching a lot of ups and a lot of downs, watching them. But certainly, a revival on offense was a big deal. A couple other folks probably sort of named Jordan Morse at a quarterback at Bowie State. He didn't really play in a lot of games. He kind of came on very, very late in the season, but had some really, really strong outings at that level. Jordan Davis was another one that, he wasn't the starter at Virginia State to start the year, but somehow, some way, he always tends to end up being the starter by the time the season ends.
Right.
Had really, really great showing in the games that he played. So yeah, just a little bit of feedback on who was on the all snub team. But like I said, you can see more of that on my column on d2football.com.
Yeah, I would say for the SIAC, we look at obviously big shout out to David Wright at Allen. He was a player of the year. But I 19 touchdowns and 17 interceptions, and I know they had a big year for them, but I also like the quarterback over at Benedict College for that offense, what he did for them. I think that's a little bit, maybe, I guess they didn't want to give everybody at Benedict all the awards. But I think I'll flip it on the other end. I would give Coach of the Year to Coach Keaton. Nothing against Coach Dennis, but I think nothing against Coach Dennis, but I think that I think what Coach Keaton has done building that program, and I know this isn't a career award, but just what he's done with that program is pretty astounding. And especially with their lack of resources, or they're building as they go along. Let's say that. I don't want to say lack of resources, because I know they're getting a new stadium and things like that, but they're building as they go along. He built that from the ground up. Someone also says Edward Waters Russell at SIAC in touchdowns, second in total passing touchdowns, higher pass percentage average, all of that stuff. Good point there. in the battle between the two quarterbacks, I was there. David Wright kind of took that one-on-one, but Russell really had a really good season and really a bright spot. And then, as you said, Kris, over in the CIAA, Dalen Lee over at quarterback for Winston-Salem State. I mean, he looks like a diamond in the rough for them. I think 16 touchdowns and maybe 6 interceptions. I thought he had a case for the Rookie of the Year. I'm not going to hold you. I thought he did. Lord only knows where they would have been without him. And he also came up big in some fourth quarters as well. Livingstone had some wide receivers that made a lot of plays. I think one young man actually led the CIAA interceptions or was close.
The stats were all messed up. Like, I know instead of trying to, go through like each individual school's websites, I kind of go to the conference's website to look. And we were talking about Matthew Henry. For whatever reason, his stats weren't right on the conference's website. And so it's kind of unfortunate to if you don't watch the games, right, that you don't see what talent Livingstone had at the wide receiver position. I think, my favorite one was Deloach because Deloach seemed like, third down, need a first down, get it to Deloach, and he was right there at the sticks. But between them, Carrillo and Matthew Henry, I mean, those are 3 really good receivers at Livingstone. So definitely they deserve their due as well.
Don't be a bitter bear. Don't be a bitter bulldog. Y'all know y'all went to that turf and got scrubbed. Hey, look.
Deloach said night to them in the fourth quarter.
And it's not even like y'all had that great of a streak against them. Y'all lost to them. It's the second time in the decade. So, hey, kind of in the same boat. It is what it is. It's a new day, buddy. But anyway, we're gonna go ahead and call that a show. I appreciate everybody for hopping on with us and talking D2 HBCU football. Our co-host Kendric, on behalf of him and Kris as well. We've had a lot of fun doing this show on YouTube all year. And so hopefully we'll get a Virginia Union win. We know Benedict still has some more time to play. And then we also have the bowl game to look forward to. So HBCU football continues to be great at all levels. And so, again, we do this show just so we make sure we shine the light on the CIAA and the SIAC, because a lot of times shows are only so long. And so the focus is a lot of places is mostly on the FCS. Shout out to Dr. Kenyatta Cavill. He does a great job. Shout out to AD Drew and those guys over at the doing what they do and everything like that. And so we just really feel like it's important to give everybody the shine. So with that being said, we're going to appreciate everybody. Make sure that you share this out when it comes out on a video feed, and let everybody else know that there's a place that you can come and talk D2 HBCU football. We don't, we like to have somebody come in here and check breaking the Bulldogs every now and then. So shout out to everybody that was in the comments. But now we appreciate all our fans. So on behalf of everybody, I appreciate it. And we will see you guys later. And remember, D2 HBCU football matters.